otherwise distinguished scholars, which in 2005-2006 established the European Research Council to direct at least some of the European budget to first-class research based on peer group review. And we're now putting about €1 billion out of the European budget into that. But I invite you to compare that with what we're spending, for example, on the common agricultural policy. I believe that in Europe we need not only to spend a lot more money on research, on our universities, if we're to be competitive in the future, but I also believe that we need to spend the money more effectively. I'm a strong believer in the liberal as well as the utilitarian arguments for higher spending on research and on universities, which should be regarded as bastions of a free society. But I don't agree with those who seem to suggest that any reform of higher education, any attempt to direct money more sensibly, represents a wicked attack on academic freedom. There is no liberal argument that I can think of for spending money badly on education or on any other subject. What are some of the consequences of our failure to invest sufficiently in higher education? Well, one of the consequences is shown by those league tables of the world's allegedly best universities, which shows the dominance of the United States and increasingly the competition from Asia. Hong Kong, with which, as the President said, I have some familiarity. Hong Kong has a population of 6.5 million, and 2 of its universities are in the world's top 50. Germany, which gave America the model for its research-based institutions, MIT, Stanford, the Humboldt model, now either has, depends on the league table you look at, either has one university at number 49 in the top 50, or else has a university at number 55. It's a shocking record. You can see similar figures if you look at the figures for Nobel Prize winners. Part of America's soft power is the attractions of its higher education system. When I was chairing that group, which I mentioned, which established the European Research Council, one of the figures which had the greatest impact on me was this, that 10 years before, 50% of young Europeans who had gone to America to do their doctoral work had come back after completing it. The year we were doing our report in 2005-2006, 25% came back. Next year, 50% of all PhD dissertations in America and 75% of all science PhD dissertations will have been written by young foreign students. In Silicon Valley, half all the startups have at least one founder who is an immigrant or a first-generation American. So if in Europe we're to become serious competitors in the knowledge-based economies of the 21st century, then we have to take that question of higher education far more seriously. I want just for a few moments, before giving you time to answer questions, to say something about Europe's external relations, Europe's role in foreign and security policy around the world. Since the end of the Cold War, since the collapse of communism in Europe, and since the bloody dismemberment of the Balkans, when in Europe we couldn't decide whether we were in favor of the process or against the process, or simply didn't want to know what was happening, a period during which 220,000 Bosnians were murdered. Since then, Europe has tried to take a rather higher profile for itself in the world, worried that it's seen as an economic giant, a foreign policy dwarf, and a security mouse. To some extent, the Bush era was convenient for us. To some extent, during the Bush era, we were able to define ourselves in contradistinction to President Bush, Vice President Cheney, and Secretary Rumsfeld. We used to argue it's what Secretary Rumsfeld would have called in that wonderful surrealist use of language of his, the greatest surrealist since Samuel Beckett. It's what Donald Rumsfeld would have called a known known. We used to say that if only there was a multilateralist in the White House, the things we could do in Europe to support the United States and to build a real partnership with them for peace and stability around the world. So what happened? We got the president of Europe's dreams. We got President Obama. We got a multilateralist. And are we now going to be able to make good on those implied promises? Are we really able to be strong partners for a more humble multilateralist superpower around the world? Well, I think at best the jury is still out on that. There isn't a European leader who doesn't want to be photographed with President Obama. We have a slightly bedraggled and dour lot of leaders who can do with being touched by a little of his tinsel. But they're not very obviously listening when they're asked to do anything. And I think this is going to be a big test for Europe in the next few years. Now, we have to be realistic about what Europe is capable of